Hey man, sorry,
What's
I'm just sitting at this conference here, but I hope it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, it's okay. So I'm going to ask you a question that is more skewed towards the mainstream audience, stuff that people
Sure,
on the ground want to know. So I think there's a lot of documentation on Datum out there that's very technical. Some of the interviews you have done as well. So I'm going to come in from another angle from like
sure,
pretty much the new guys on the street. So okay.
sure.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. People are talking about how Google, Facebook, and all these big companies are abusing data for their use, and people are
Yeah,
very iffy about businesses that touch data. So you're in that zone. Could you tell us more about how you're going to go around it?
yeah. So actually, what happens nowadays when you sign up for something like Facebook or Google, you normally agree to a sort of privacy policy, or the company tells you how they will treat your data. But in reality, the privacy policy takes almost all rights away from you, right? It
Yeah,
basically transfers data ownership to those companies, and they can do almost anything they want with your data. But this is slowly changing. So some governments are already working to change that. So in the European Union next year, they're introducing the General Data Protection Regulation, and this returns some rights to the users, to the individuals. For example, the right to get your data deleted. And we think these kind of things are very important and essential, right? I mean,
yeah.
data is something that is valuable and it's very personal. It's yours effectively.
Mm.
And so with Datum, we are really trying to return this data ownership to you, to the individuals. And the way we're doing it is we're building this global data storage infrastructure where anyone can store structured data. So that's like textual data that usually goes in spreadsheets, or that's the kind of machine readable data that phones and other devices collect about you and services.
Yeah.
And you can put this data into the Datum network, and you are the only one who owns the private keys to this data. So you're the only one who can access and decrypt this data. And then on top of that, we have the data marketplace. So you can choose to share or sell access to your data. And we have something called proxy re-encryption. So this technology allows the Datum network, the storage nodes, which are the miners in the Datum network,
Yeah.
to change the encryption of your data to the public key of a data buyer. So the data buyer that has made a trade with you will be able to decrypt your specific data that you sold to him, but the Datum network itself, not. So the storage nodes, the miners that basically host your data, are not
Mm.
able to decrypt your data.
So you're using the power of blockchain technology to just put everyone's information and they hold their private key. So you totally decentralize the controls. You're not even holding on to any of the documentation, right? And
Exactly.
that's the
Yeah.
beauty of it. So people actually get back their rights, and if they choose to, they can actually monetize their own information. That's
Yeah.
that's what it
And
is.
I think blockchain is really important for this because it allows this kind of trustless environment where you don't need to trust one central big database or one central big company, right, to store the data for you. Instead, you can trust the network, but you don't have to trust any of the single storage nodes, any of these miners that
Mm.
are running the network, right? So
Yeah,
that's the same concept that is behind Bitcoin. And actually, even before Bitcoin, there are things like Torrent Network and others, right?
yeah.
They're basically, they are run by the people for the people, right?
Mm.
And so we want to build this infrastructure to store this personal data on the blockchain. And we really think now is the time. Now the blockchain technology is mature enough to start to be able to do these kind of things. And it's really exciting, that we don't just have to build another central database, right? So regarding the value of data, we have a calculator that everyone can look at on calc.datum.org, calc.datum.org, and you can get an idea there of how valuable your data would be and how valuable data from different services are, for example, from Facebook, Twitter, and others.
Mm.
And you can also experiment a bit. Like, data is more valuable if you're willing to give up some of your identity, but that's kind of basically up to you, right? You
Yeah.
can say, hey, I just sell some anonymous data for that price. I'm willing to give up information like, hey, I'm a 30 to 40-year-old male from Switzerland, right? And then the data may be worth a bit more. Or you may even be willing to give up your full identity in return for a high price, right? So you can check out our
Yeah.
calculator and play around a bit. Yeah.
Correct. I remember that was the one thing that got me really interested at the talk yesterday when I was like, oh wow, you mean I could just walk around and make money off giving out data? So would
Yeah.
so would you say that the majority of this because I feel that this whole data mining and having the control back of data and selling data is a very new market. I don't think a lot of people are even aware this can happen in the future because we are so used to just giving it up to the big guys, right? So do
Yeah.
you see that Datum is going to be a game changer in the marketplace because more and more apps, more and more businesses is going to be built upon Datum, and then we're going
Yes.
to find a lot of young people who these days actually give up all their confidentiality and anonymity on social media just for that
Yeah,
limelight, right?
totally. And so absolutely. So we are actually already working with the first few companies and developers to integrate data. And as soon as you are using a service, right, that starts kind of rewarding you for your data, you're gonna ask the same of the bigger services, right? So pressure will start to be mounted on even people like Facebook and Google. People are gonna ask, hey, so why are these guys taking all of this valuable data and not giving anything back in return, right? And so I have one of the first products here. I don't know if you can see it. It's a smart water bottle. It's called Osmo. And this water bottle basically tracks how much water or coffee you drink every day. And this is one of the first products from starting next month. With this special edition, you'll be able to send this data directly to the Datum network, how much water you drink, and then you can sell this data. And this data is already being bought by, for example, insurance companies, but also, for example, used by researchers that are looking into the cause of kidney stones in children, and that is related to how much water they drink and intake. So this is really a good example of how, there is really so much data out there that is really valuable that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Like, you wouldn't have think that tracking how much water you drink, right, would be something that is valuable enough for someone else to pay you, money for this kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's almost like if I could imagine the future, uh, everything in life from the watch to the glasses to the water to shoes to almost any aspect of our being can be data mined. And we won't even, the public won't even know Datum exists because you're going to be on the underlying infrastructure that other businesses and
Correct.
services build upon. And
Yes,
all you have to
correct.
do is just
Yes.
select that we want to participate in offering data and then we just get paid.
Yes. And so for these companies, for the Osmo water bottle, for example, it's also a challenge how to effectively monetize this data. For most companies nowadays, and especially tech, internet, or IoT devices, the real value lies in the data, right?
Yeah.
And so these companies have to make all these deals with other companies to unlock value. And if you think of it, at the moment, you have to make all these deals on a custom basis. You have to contact these people. You have to say, hey, I have some data. You have to make a contract. And so with Datum, we're trying to build something as simple as eBay, where you can basically go as a small developer even and say, hey, here's some data I have, right? Would someone be interested to buy this? On the flip side, we also level the playing field for smaller developers to compete with the big guys like Google. So Google has this thing, Google Now, the personal assistant, which is amazing, right? Half an hour before you are late to an appointment, it tells you, hey, you better get going. The traffic is really bad today.
Yeah.
But they can only do that because they're reading your email inbox, they have your calendar, they have the traffic data, and they have your personal location at any time, right? That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Now, a small developer doesn't have this data, right? But once you are onboarded as a user on the Datum network, you have the power to give that small developer access to this kind of data, to your personal data, of course, always under your control, and for that developer to deliver a specific service. But this means someone can start to build a personal assistant that is really competitive, for example, with Google Now and even Siri, for example. And so that's where we think, the long-term vision really lies for Datum, right? It's to go beyond even the fact that you just directly get paid for, some of your data, but we want to enable a new ecosystem where we enable smaller developers and anyone really to unlock that vast knowledge that sits in the data around the world. If I'm a guy in New York, then maybe my data is worth a lot of money. But what about the guy somewhere in the desert, in a not so developed country? Maybe a guy with 3 sheep somewhere in the middle of Africa. And we actually found that there's another company that contacted us that is one of the biggest micro lenders in Africa. And they're really interested in the data of that guy, that guy who doesn't have much, who somewhere,
Yeah.
lives a basic life somewhere in the desert. And the interesting thing is, the money they're willing to pay that guy for his data, right, is relatively speaking much more than someone would pay, someone that sits in New York. So that
Yeah.
guy can make some money with his data, but he also earns much more, right? So what's really interesting is, especially in developing countries, the data is actually much more valuable compared to what the average income is of people. And so we have been, we are trying to get to a point where we can make some part of this data could be some sort of a basic universal income, right? Because every person is creating this data, and we're trying to get to the point where, sure, it's not going to keep you alive, it's not going to be a proper income, but maybe it's a small fraction, something that everyone has. Everyone is creating data, and that is something that everyone can in the future monetize through Datum.
I'm going to take a very close look at Datum throughout the next few years, because I'm quite sure this is just going to blow out and create secondary and tertiary market. So, good job, Roger. Just to get to know you a little bit better, what got you interested in data mining or on this project on Datum at all? What's your background like?
Sure. So I first dabbled in crypto about 3 years ago when it was the first small Bitcoin bubble. And I did a lot of mining stuff. I wrote some mining pool software those times. And that was the time of those fork coins, right? There was people were taking Bitcoin and Litecoin and changing the name and doing all these forks. And so I was kind of in that market for a few months. And then Bitcoin kind of tanked. The price went down and the price completely flatlined, right? Over 2 or 3 years even. And so during that time, I started working on 2 different IoT startups. And one of them was called Clever Baby. We were developing a Fitbit for babies, so a device that tracks the health of your newborn. And we collected over 1 million data points and started thinking during the beta phase, hey, so how can we sell? Because this data is super valuable. So Pampers and Huggies, wanted to buy this data, but also researchers and pharmaceuticals. But we felt it's very tricky because the data of your newborn, right? If you ask a parent, that's really something very sensitive and also very personal. And so I started to think, hey, there needs to be a way to, instead that we just take this data away from the parents in our privacy policy and then go to the Pampers and Huggies and sell it to them, there must be a way to include the parents. And out of this idea developed Datum, and the idea for Datum that, hey, why don't we include the user, the owner of this data, the source of this data, right? And include him in this whole transaction of making money with this data. And that is a very empowering thing. And when we're talking to the individuals now, all the people that are getting on board on datum.org, for example, they're all really excited about this, data ownership. And as you mentioned before, many people are actually not aware that their data is really worth something. And it's really something, once they understand that there is value to it, they want to take an active part, in kind of owning it and monetizing it.
Take the power of you back in your hands. That's what I like about your project, the whole Datum idea.
Well, so our hashtag is take back your data. And if you go on Twitter, you can see actually one of our fans is William Shatner.
Oh, wow.
Captain Kirk guy.
Yeah.
So if you go on Twitter now, you can see a little video he did.
Did you know that companies pay celebrities like me to tweet stuff out all the time? Well, now regular citizens just like you can get paid for their data too. Check out datum.org and take back your data.
Cool, man. I love it. Hey, thank you, Roger. Thanks for your time. In fact, I'm going to suggest.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest Datum as one of my top 10 coins for 2017, and also to look out for it in 2018. Thanks a lot, Roger.
Okay, very cool. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.